Whispers in the Walls has just been released, and this update has brought so many new things to Warframe, and one of those things is the brand new Warframe Qorvex. He is our 55th Warframe. At first, I wasn't too sure about Corvex, but I have found quite a unique way to play him. Alright, before we get into the video, a huge thank you to all of our channel members. Your support means the world to me. Let's talk about his abilities. Corvex's passive gives you +3 punch through. Now, I have seen some people be like, oh, this is trash. But here's the thing, it's actually not that bad. +3 punch through is fat, it's a lot of punch through. Your second ability puts enemies in a straight line, meaning any weapon that was a single target weapon before or just simply lacked punch through, well, now it shreds all of these enemies in a straight line. His first ability is Chirinka Pillar. Summon a pillar that slows enemies and pulses radiation with a guaranteed status effect. You can have 2 pillars up at a time, and initially it does a slow pulse. However, these pillars can be supercharged with his second ability, Containment Wall, or his fourth ability, Crucible Blast. These pillars are okay, and I'll explain why. The pulses cannot go through walls, meaning it needs a line of sight, so it's only really good in open-ish spaces. The base range is 8 meters. Even if you stack up to about 175% range, you only get about 14 meters. This isn't so bad, but in open-ish spaces, it's alright. For it to do any significant damage, it needs to be charged up so it pulses faster, dealing faster ticks. And if you are dealing with steel path enemies, you'll need to armor strip them for them to do anything. His second ability is Containment Wall. I love this grouping ability. At first I wasn't sure, but the more I used it, the more I realized how amazing it is. Summon 2 giant walls and slam them together, lining up all the enemies in a single straight line, inflicting them with radiation damage. But you also give them damage vulnerability, which is a decent damage boost. And why this ability is so great is because of his passive, and also if you pair it with his fourth ability. Adding range onto this ability makes it this long ass corridor, which is just super satisfying for grouping massive amounts of enemies together. It's great for corridors and tight spaces. We then have his third ability, which is Disometric Guard. Disometric Guard guards yourself and your allies from status effects. Each time you kill or assist in killing an enemy who is affected by radiation, the number of status effects goes up. At base, the maximum amount of stacks is 10. The initial stacks will be 5 on cast. So as you kill enemies, this will stack up to 10 stacks. Adding strength onto this ability will increase the initial and max stacks. This ability is weird. It's like a free rolling guard without the invulnerability. It just blocks status effects, but it's the instance of status effects, not per status type. So when an enemy applies puncture to you, it'll block that puncture, not a puncture as a whole. This applies to all the other status effects as well, but it's a percentage for each status to be blocked, which is 10%. So it's not a guarantee block, which is very odd to me. It's a bit weird, but overall a okay survivability increase for you and your team. Then we move on to his fourth, which is Crucible Blast. Stand dead still and shoot out a beam from your core. Each enemy struck by the beam suffers from radiation damage with guaranteed status effects. Enemies affected by radiation status will explode in a chain reaction. Now again, I wasn't sure about it at first because I didn't like the whole stand still and do nothing mechanic, but the way it works is you cast a beam, it'll proc radiation insanely fast for every enemy you hit. Then they will all start exploding and create this chain reaction which will just bounce between all of them. The more enemies that are nearby and the closer they are, the means more damage it'll do. Think of it like Volt's discharge ability or just electric procs in general with the whole chaining. If you add armor stripping to this, well, you have some serious damage output with this ability. His 4 does need groups of enemies to be worth it, otherwise it simply doesn't chain enough and it just does no damage. Overall, his base kit isn't bad, it's actually really fun. It's just his first ability I'm not too sure about. Now, how would you play him with his base kit? It's actually pretty simple. You'd have Disometric Guard up at all times, of course. You would cast his second to group them up, cast your 1 to apply radiation procs and slow, and then cast your fourth ability into the enemies while aiming towards the pillar so it supercharges it, allowing for big amounts of damage. That's on a basic level. Or you could just skip his 1 entirely, cast your second and fourth every time, and you'll just eliminate everything. Which is why I say his first ability is his Helminth slot for later game builds. However, there is 2 slight issues with Corvex. None of his abilities have outright damage mitigation. The only thing we have is his fourth ability, which makes you invulnerable while you cast it, which, let's be honest, you want to play the game instead of just being in his fourth the whole time. His third only blocks status effects. There's no damage reduction, invisibility, or anything like that. So we're going to have to rely on Arcanes and adaptation to keep you alive when you start venturing into later game content. For earlier content, simple armor mods and such will suffice for him. The only thing that is his survivability is his radiation procs, which makes enemies fight each other. And the next issue is Corvex has a very low energy pool, only 484 with primed flow. He's quite a spammy frame, so he needs good energy sustain. You'll have to make use of Death Cube with Energy Generator, Arcane Energize for later game builds, and Equilibrium. With how his kit is designed, Corvex benefits from decent range and strength. A little duration is also nice if you have his first ability, but if you don't have his first ability, then there's actually no reason to run duration. He can be quite a spammy frame, so efficiency if you don't have good energy sustain is really important. With this in mind, for early game players, his aura slot is Vazarin, so you can run Stand United as an option or whatever aura you have available. Then we can run these 4 simple mods here, which gives us a little range, strength, and duration. If you have the capacity, you can add Steel Fiber to stack armor, as he has high base armor. For the mid-game players, mid to late start chart, if you're really starting to love Corvex and have invested in a reactor plus 1 or 2 former, you can run this build here, which has balanced stats across the board. This is comfy for those who struggle with energy. For the players who are in early steel path or mid steel path, you can use this build here, which focuses on balanced stats across the board again, and we even go for a bit of efficiency to spam with him a bit more. The arcanes with him are flexible, but I will go over which arcanes to use with him shortly. If you do have the prime version of flow and continuity, then just use that. The Exodus slot is flexible too. Now we move on to the more endgame builds, but before we do that, I want to discuss why I build him this way. His fourth ability is Crucible Blast, which is a decent AoE ability, but when you start moving to later steel path, you need armor stripping to do more damage. The thing is though, mechanically this ability kinda sucks, in the sense you have the whole stop-start playstyle, standing still, waiting for it to end, then rinse and repeat. This isn't favorable for most people. But what I've noticed is you can ability cancel mid-animation. And the reason we want to do this is because all you need to do with this ability is do 1 tick of damage to the first enemy or the first few enemies, and it will immediately start the explosion chains. You don't need to follow through with the entire ability duration. So the way we play this is as follows. Cast your second to put them in a straight line, cast Terrify or any armor stripping ability you have subsumed, then cast your 4, see the first tick of damage go off, press 4 again to cancel, and you'll just watch them die insanely fast. In fact, you can do it in rapid succession by tapping 4 and literally a split second tapping it again to cancel it, and some reason it goes through. Another cool thing about his fourth ability is it doesn't need line of sight, it can actually go through walls or certain objects. You can, however, if you want to, hold it in for about a second in the line because the explosive damage scales per radiation status effect, so at max stacks you do more damage. His fourth applies radiation so quickly it's insane, so there's no need to prime beforehand. This is the build here for this setup. I run Arcane Guardian to scale more armor and Augmented to get more strength. Because we subsume his 1, there is no real reason to run duration, so then we focus on more strength with something like energy conversion, which is quite an expensive mod, but I don't want to drop my efficiency with blind rage, so this is flexible. You can also just put Augur Secrets there. I am running a shield gating setup for this one, as I will be spamming a lot, but you can switch out one of the mods for health conversion, and the Exilus is flexible if you have space for it. We run Adaptation because his third ability is basically Rodent Guard. This is a really satisfying build, especially just seeing all the chains sprayed between all the enemies. The high range is also great for his second ability as well. If you don't want to subsume an armor stripping ability, we now have new Emerald Archon shards, which increase the max corrosive stacks, which means full armor strip from Archon shards alone, which is quite strong. This is obviously for those who have access to these, which will be a little later as it is a few hours after release. Now that is the specific build that I made for him, which I will probably be playing a lot. For the other two options that I've made, Breach Surge has some funny mechanics with his fourth. Because of all the damage instances, the amount of sparks that go out is insane. It's quite funny to actually see, and this has some serious damage potential if you can do armor stripping through the new emerald shards, or simply just use a companion like the Helios. This is the build here, and then we have Raw, which also significantly increases the damage from his fourth ability, which will also need external armor stripping for the tougher enemies. But here is the build for Raw. When it comes to the Arcanes with him, he benefits from more armor so he can stay alive, so Guardian and Reaper are good options here. Molt augmented for more strength is really good for him. Arcane Energize for the later game players if you struggle with energy. Arcane Eruption for CC, and then anyone that you want for damage buffing or utility, it's your choice here. For Archon shards, he desperately needs casting speed. In my opinion, he's got really slow casting times for his abilities, so I have already put 2 casting speed shards on him. And then you can go either strength or making use of the new Archon shards, which I haven't had time to look at and test, so this is up to you here. This leads us onto the final thoughts on him. Is he good? Well, here is the thing. I think he's fun. He's got a really cool kit, but I'm not too sure if he's broken and like the new best frame. He's good, but not the best of the best. I honestly don't see what game mode he'd be insanely good for, besides game modes which have a lot of enemies like endurance runs. The radiation procs are really nice for crowd control, and his second is amazing for grouping. I love it. His passive is actually really good for weapons that lack punch through. He definitely needs armor stripping for later game content, but the Breach Surge and armor stripping builds are my favorite. In all honesty, he doesn't really need a Helminth. His base kit is fine. Overall, seems like a fun and decent frame. He's not horrible. Definitely worth the investment. Anyways, guys, that is Corvex done and dusted. I will be making a book video next, so stay tuned for that. And that is all for today. Thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one.